The night in Makoni was heavy with rain, the kind that beats hard against rooftops and rattles every window. Inside her small home, Amara moved quietly, trying not to disturb her husband. She had always been gentle and patient, a woman who carried the weight of her family with love. But tonight, her kindness met only anger. Tawanda's voice rose above the thunder, sharp and cruel. His words cut deeper than the storm outside as he called her a burden, as if her presence in his life was nothing but a weight. Before Amara could answer, his rage took over. He grabbed her by the arm with no mercy, dragging her toward the door. The house she had made a home, the place she had poured her heart into, was suddenly no longer her. The wooden door flew open, and the storm rushed in, wild and cold. In the middle of the night, under the furious sky, he shoved her out. Rain soaked her wrapper in seconds, clinging to her body as she stumbled into the mud. From the darkened windows of nearby houses, shadows moved. Neighbors watched in silence, their whispers mixing with the roar of the storm. No one dared step forward, but their eyes followed her, pity written across their hidden faces. Amara stood trembling, heartbroken, staring at the locked door that had shut her out. The rain poured harder, each drop echoing the truth she had never wanted to face. The man she trusted, the man she loved, had cast her away into the night. Amara stood in the mud, her bare feet sinking into the cold earth as the rain poured down harder and harder. Her thin wrapper was torn at the shoulder, clinging to her skin, offering no warmth at all. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, but it did nothing against the biting wind. She could still hear the sharp click of the lock as Tawanda sealed the door behind her, shutting her out of the only home she had ever known. The sound echoed in her chest like a final judgment. She pressed her palm to the wooden door, her tears mixing with the rain running down her face. "Tawanda, please," she cried, her voice breaking, but there was no answer. Only silence, heavy and cruel. Inside, she knew he was listening, but he chose to ignore her. The man who once held her close, who once whispered promises under the stars, now acted as if she were nothing. Each sob left her weaker, yet she couldn't stop calling out. Love made her plead even when dignity begged her to walk away. Her stomach ached as she sank to her knees in the mud, clutching it protectively. The child growing inside her was the only reason she had kept pushing forward through all his insults and tempers. She whispered to her unborn baby, as if her voice could shield it from the storm, "I won't give up on you." But the truth pressed heavy on her heart. She was alone, cold, and unwanted in the middle of the night, with no one to turn to. From the shadows, the neighbors still watched. Curtains moved, doors creaked open and quickly shut again. They pitied her, but none came to help. Fear kept them hidden. They whispered her name in hushed voices, their faces filled with sadness, but their feet stayed planted firmly inside their warm houses. Amara felt their eyes, but it only deepened her shame. She was not only rejected by her husband, but also left to be pitied by the whole town. The storm raged louder, lightning splitting the sky, thunder shaking the ground beneath her. Her body trembled from the cold and exhaustion, but her spirit shook from betrayal. She thought of the day she married Tawanda, how she had walked down the aisle filled with dreams of a happy life. She remembered how proud she had been to wear his name, to believe she had found a partner to stand with her through joy and hardship. Now all those dreams lay shattered in the mud where she knelt. Still, through the pain, a small flame of strength flickered inside her. Though the night pressed down like a heavy curtain and the rain soaked her to the bone, she refused to collapse completely. She whispered again to her child, her voice hoarse but steady, "We will survive this." The door behind her stayed locked, the man inside unmoved. But even abandoned in the darkness, a part of her knew that this storm would not be the end of her story. It would be the beginning. Amara's body finally gave in to the cold. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into the mud, her cheek pressing against the wet ground. Her tears blended with the rain until she could no longer tell the difference. Her wrapper clung to her like a second skin, heavy and useless against the storm. The world around her felt like it was fading into darkness, her strength slipping away with every shiver. She whispered weakly to her unborn child, "Hold on, just hold on." But even her own voice was almost lost in the roar of the thunder. Then, through the blur of rain and tears, a sudden light cut through the night. Headlights, bright and steady. They grew closer until the sound of tires splashing through puddles filled the street. A sleek black car rolled to a stop just a few steps away from where she lay trembling. For a moment, Amara thought she was dreaming, that her mind was playing tricks in her desperation. But then the door opened, and out stepped a tall man holding an umbrella. It was Mr. Chikwere, one of the most respected men in Makoni. Known for his businesses and his kindness, people often spoke his name with admiration. He had wealth, influence, and a heart that gave freely to those in need. But never in his life had he expected to find Amara, once the beautiful young wife admired by many, lying in the mud on such a night. His face froze in shock as he rushed toward her. "My God, Amara," he he exclaimed, his voice heavy with both alarm and compassion. Without hesitation, he knelt down, his polished shoes sinking into the dirt. He reached out and lifted her gently, his strong arms steady where hers had failed. Amara tried to speak, but only a broken sob escaped her lips. She clung weakly to his shirt, her body trembling against his. "You're safe now," he said softly, though the storm still raged around them. He quickly slipped off his thick coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of the fabric felt like a miracle against her frozen skin. For the first time that night, she felt the faint comfort of being shielded, of not being entirely alone. With great care, Mr. Chikwer guided her to his car, opening the back door and helping her inside. The leather seats embraced her weary body, and for the first time since Tawanda threw her out, she could breathe without choking on despair. Rain drummed against the roof, but inside the car there was quiet, safety, and the scent of his cologne mixing with the smell of the storm. As the engine purred to life, Amara closed her eyes, clutching his coat tightly. She didn't know where he was taking her, but it no longer mattered. The door that had locked her out was behind her now. Ahead, in the glow of the headlights cutting through the darkness, there was at least a chance of hope. The car ride felt unreal to Amara. Her body was still shaking from the storm, and her hands clutched Mr. Chikwer's coat as if it were her last anchor. She tried to speak, to thank him, but her voice refused to come. The only sound she made was a soft sob every now and then, muffled by the hum of the engine. Mr. Chikwer glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes full of concern, but he said nothing, giving her space to breathe. The warmth of the heater slowly thawed her frozen body, though her heart still felt as though it had been shattered into pieces. After a short drive, the car turned into a wide, gated compound. The house stood tall and graceful, its lights glowing warmly against the wet night. It looked like something out of another world, so far from the small, crumbling house where she had lived with Tawanda. The gate opened, and the car rolled smoothly onto the driveway. When it stopped, the front door opened, and a woman hurried out holding a shawl. It was Nurai, Mr. Chikwer's wife. She was a woman of gentle beauty, her face carrying the kind of softness that made people instantly trust her. When she saw Amara stepping out of the car, drenched and trembling, she did not hesitate. She rushed forward, wrapping the shawl around Amara's shoulders and pulling her close, the way a mother would hold a wounded child. "My dear, you're safe now," Nurai whispered, her voice calm and warm. Inside the house, everything smelled of comfort, fresh bread, soap, and polished wood. The air was warm, the floors clean, the walls lined with pictures of family and joy. Amara felt out of place at first, her muddy wrapper clinging to her body, her hair dripping onto the tiles. She looked down in shame, afraid of dirtying such a beautiful home. But Nurai simply guided her to a chair and knelt before her, gently removing the wet wrapper and replacing it with clean, dry clothes. Amara's eyes filled with tears. No one had touched her with such tenderness in years. She had grown used to harsh words, heavy hands, and cold silences. Now, in the care of this woman she had never truly known, she felt a kind of love that didn't judge or demand. Nurai brought her warm tea, pressing the cup into her trembling hands, and smiled when Amara finally took a sip. "You are not alone here," Nurai said softly, brushing damp hair away from Amara's face. "Rest. You need to gather your strength." As she sank into the soft bed prepared for her, Amara's body finally relaxed. The storm outside had not yet ended, but in this house she found peace. For the first time in years, she felt warmth, dignity, and compassion wrapping around her like a blanket. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Perhaps this was not the end of her story after all. Perhaps, by the grace of strangers, a new chapter was beginning. Days slowly turned into weeks, and Amara began to feel her strength returning under the shelter of the Chikwer home. Every morning, she woke up to the kindness of Nurai, who always made sure she ate well and rested enough. But Amara's heart would not allow her to sit idle. She felt a deep need to give back, to show her gratitude for the love and protection she had been given. So one morning, she quietly made her way into the kitchen. At first, she started small, helping with the cooking, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, baking bread. But soon her natural touch began to shine. The meals she prepared carried a special flavor, a warmth that made everyone at the table pause with each bite. Nurai would smile proudly and say, "You cook with your heart, Amara. That's why it tastes so good." Cooking was not the only way she expressed herself. Nurai had given her some old fabric to mend, and as Amara sat by the window with needle and thread, something magical happened. She didn't just fix the clothes, she transformed them. She added delicate stitches, new patterns, and small designs that made each piece look more beautiful than before. Soon she began creating entirely new garments, sketching patterns on scraps of paper and bringing them to life with whatever fabric she could find. One afternoon, as she worked on a bright wrapper, Mr. Chikwer walked by and stopped. His eyes widened as he studied her work. "Amara," he said slowly, "who taught you to sew like this?" She looked up nervously, unsure if her designs were good enough to be praised. "No one, sir," she said softly. I see things in my mind, and I try to make them real with the cloth." He picked up the half-finished garment, turning it over in his hand. The stitching was clean, the patterns bold yet elegant. He could see not just skill but vision, something rare and powerful. For a moment, he was silent, and Amara feared she had done something wrong. But then he smiled. "Amara, this is a gift," he said firmly. "A true talent." Her heart skipped. No one had ever called her gifted before. For years, she had been made to feel small, invisible, useless. But here was a man of great success looking at her work with respect. That evening, Mr. Chikwer shared an idea. "I own a textile company in Harare Chikwer Fabric. We work with some of the best designers in the country. I would like you to join us. You have something special, Amara. With guidance and resources, you could go far." Tears filled her eyes as she listened. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. A door had been slammed on her in the storm, but now another was opening, one that led not just to survival but to purpose. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream bigger than she ever had before. When Amara moved to Harare to join Chikwer Fabrics, it felt like stepping into an entirely new world. The city buzzed with life, full of noise, lights, and endless movement. At first, she felt small and uncertain, but she carried with her something stronger than fear, her pain, her memories, and the fire to prove she was more than what Tawanda had called her. Every time she sat at the sewing machine or sketched a new design, she poured that pain into her work. Each cut of fabric, each careful stitch was like stitching her own broken heart back together. She worked day and night, often forgetting to eat, her fingers raw from the needle. The other designers at Chikwer Fabrics noticed her intensity. Some were surprised at how quickly her ideas flowed, how she could transform ordinary cloth into something extraordinary. She took inspiration from her roots in Makoni, the bold colors of the markets, the flowing lines of traditional Zimbabwean wear, the strength and softness of womanhood. Her designs carried a story, and people felt it when they saw her clothes. Within months, her creations began to shine on the runway. At cultural fashion shows in Harare, models wearing Amara's designs drew gasps and applause. The dresses danced under the lights, each piece telling a story of resilience, beauty, and hope. The audience didn't just see fabric, they felt emotions stitched into every garment. Soon, her name was whispered across the city. Designers, stylists, and critics all wanted to know, who is this woman bringing something so fresh, so powerful, to the fashion world? Investors began to notice too. After one major show, a group of business people approached her with offers. They saw not only her talent, but also her potential to grow beyond Zimbabwe, to bring her designs to Africa and even the world. Amara could hardly believe it. Just months earlier, she had been thrown into the rain with nothing but a torn wrapper. Now, she was being asked to build something that could change her future forever. With the support of Mr. and Mrs. Chikwer, she launched her own fashion label. She called it Rainflower Design. The name came from her journey, how beauty can bloom even in the harshest storms, how the rain that nearly drowned her had also washed her clean and made her grow. The first collection under her new label was an instant success. The colors were bold, the patterns fierce yet graceful, a perfect blend of tradition and modern elegance. As her work spread, magazines featured her story. Billboards showed her designs across Harare, and young girls began to look up to her, inspired by how she turned tears into triumph. Amara would often sit in her studio late at night, staring at her sketches with quiet amazement. She still carried the scars of her past, but now those scars had become the thread of her success. She was no longer the woman abandoned in the storm. She was the woman who bloomed because of it. Back in Makoni, the small town where the storm had once swallowed Amara's cries, whispers began to spread like wildfire. It started with a neighbor who had traveled to Harare and returned with wide eyes and stories. "Do you know the woman on the billboard in the city? That designer they're calling the pride of Zimbabwe? It's Amara." At first, people laughed, thinking it was impossible. How could the same woman who had been thrown out in the rain, rejected by her husband, now be on television? But soon, the truth became undeniable. Her face was everywhere, on glossy magazine covers, in TV interviews, and on giant posters along busy streets. The people of Makoni began to see her name in the newspapers, attached to headlines like "Rainflower Designs Shines at Harare Fashion Show" and "Amara, the woman who transformed pain into power." Those who had once pitted her now spoke her name with awe. Women in the market shook their heads in disbelief, telling one another, "That night when Tawanda pushed her into the storm, we thought her life was finished. Look at her now, she is stronger than ever." Even the young girls in town started to dream differently. They pointed at the newspapers and whispered, "If Amara can do it, maybe we can too." Mothers used her story to encourage their daughters, reminding them that worth is not decided by any man, not even a husband. Amara had become more than a success. She had become a symbol of hope. Meanwhile, the same neighbors who had once hidden behind their curtains the night she was cast out now walked proudly telling visitors, "We knew her. She is from Makoni." People who had once looked at her with pity now wished they had treated her better. Some even tried to rewrite their memories, claiming they had always believed she was destined for greatness. But the biggest change was in how people spoke of Tawanda. Once proud and boastful, he had become the subject of ridicule. "The fool who threw away gold," some said. Others mocked him openly, shaking their heads. He called her a burden, and now she carries the weight of success. His name was no longer spoken with respect, but with scorn. The tables had turned, and Makoni no longer pitted Amara. It pitted the man who had failed to see her worth. Every time Amara appeared on television, walking gracefully at her fashion shows or speaking with confidence about her journey, the people of Makoni gathered around their radios and screens, watching in silence. Some cried quietly, touched by how far she had come. Others clapped their hands, saying, "She belongs to us. She is our pride." In the very town where she was once humiliated, her story had become legend. Amara was no longer the woman thrown out into the rain. She was the flower that bloomed because of it, and now the whole town, and even the whole nation, was watching her shine. Tawanda's life had once been full of pride. He used to walk through Makoni with his chest out, his voice loud, boasting about how he was the man of his house. But as the years passed, that pride began to crumble. After casting Amara away, he thought he would find happiness elsewhere. He took on a mistress in the city, spending money recklessly to impress her. New clothes, fine restaurants, endless promises. For a while, he felt powerful, convinced he had proven something. But pride without wisdom is dangerous, and soon his pockets grew empty. Debt began to pile up, little by little at first, then all at once. The jobs he once relied on slipped through his fingers, his friends stopped answering his calls, and the very people he once looked down upon now turned their backs on him. Creditors came knocking at his door, their voices sharp, their threats sharper. He sold furniture, borrowed more money, and made excuse after excuse. But nothing could save him from the hole he had dug. The mistress who had once clung to his arm noticed the change. The fancy dinners became cheaper, the gifts stopped coming, and soon her affection faded. One morning, she packed her bags and left without looking back. She didn't just take her clothes. She took the last bit of money he had been hiding. When Tawanda discovered she was gone, he sat on the floor of his small room, holding his head in his hands, his pride shattered. For the first time, he tasted the bitterness of loneliness. The man who once mocked Amara for being a burden now carried the weight of his own mistakes. The streets of the city that once felt like freedom now mocked him with every step. He was invisible, forgotten, unwanted. With nothing left, no money, no friends, no woman to lean on, Tawanda had no choice but to return to Makoni. But even that journey home felt heavy. He arrived in the town looking thinner, older, his clothes worn, his eyes dull. The man who had once thrown his wife into the rain now looked like he had been dragged through storms of his own making. People in Makoni noticed the change instantly. The same neighbors who had watched him humiliate Amara now whispered about his downfall. "Look at him," they said quietly. "The proud lion has become a starving dog." Children pointed at him on the street, and men who once drank with him shook their heads in pity. No one offered him respect, only silence or laughter behind his back. Tawanda felt the weight of it all, but bitterness still clung to him. Instead of admitting his wrongs, he blamed the world, fate, even Amara's success, for his suffering. Yet deep down, a part of him knew the truth, that his arrogance had cost him everything. He returned to Makoni not as the strong man he once claimed to be, but as a shadow of himself, broken, ashamed, and with nothing left to call his own. The afternoon sky over Harare had turned heavy and gray, the kind of sky that warned of rain. Amara stepped out of her office, her assistant holding an umbrella above her head as she walked toward her car. She looked elegant in a simple but stylish dress from her own rainflower collection, her confidence shining in the way she carried herself. Cameras sometimes waited for her outside, but today there was no flashing light, only the quiet drizzle starting to fall. As she reached the gates, she noticed a figure standing just beyond them. At first, she thought it was another client waiting to speak with her, but then her eyes narrowed. The man was frail, his shoulders hunched, his clothes soaked through. His shoes were caked in mud, and his eyes, once sharp with pride, looked empty and desperate. She froze where she stood. It was Tawanda. For a moment, the years between them seemed to collapse. She remembered the night he dragged her into the storm, the way the door had slammed in her face, the sound of her own cries lost in the thunder. And now here he was, standing in the rain just as she had once stood. But this time, he was the one cast out by life. "Amara," his voice cracked, weak and hoarse. He stepped forward, trembling. "Please forgive me. I was wrong. I didn't see your worth. I lost everything. Please take me back." His hands shook as he reached toward her, his eyes pleading. The rain ran down his face, mixing with tears he could no longer hold back. Her assistant shifted uncomfortably, looking at Amara for guidance, but she lifted her hands slightly, signaling for patience. She studied him carefully, her heart steady. He looked nothing like the proud man who had once towered over her with anger. He was broken, reduced, begging like a child who had lost his way. People passing by began to slow, watching the scene unfold. Some recognized them both. They whispered among themselves, remembering the story that had spread from Makoni to Harare, the wife thrown into the storm, and the husband who had mocked her. Now the tables had turned, and the city was witnessing it. Tawanda fell to his knees in the mud at her feet. "Amara, I have nothing left," he cried. "No home, no family, no one to stand by me. I only have you. Please let me come back. I will change. I will love you the way I should have." His voice cracked, and for the first time in his life, his pride was gone. Amara looked down at him, silent for a long moment. The rain fell harder, beating against her umbrella, against his bowed head. She felt no hatred, only the sharp truth of how life had brought him full circle. She had once been the one begging at the door while he shut her out. Now it was him in the mud, pleading for mercy. And she knew the answer he was about to hear would change everything. Amara stood tall, the umbrella above her shielding her from the storm, while Tawanda knelt in the mud, begging for what he had once thrown away. For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent around them, as if even the rain waited for her reply. She looked into his eyes, and in them she saw no strength, no love, only regret too late to matter. Her voice was calm, steady, and sharp enough to pierce the storm. "You threw me out in the rain," she said, her words clear and final. "But the rain washed me clean. Now I shine without you." The sentence hung in the air, powerful and unshakable. Tawanda's face crumbled as he lowered his head, his sobs swallowed by the roar of the storm. He had nothing left to hold on to, not even the woman he once believed he could break. Amara turned away, her steps slow but firm. She no longer carried the weight of his cruelty. Every tear she had shed had already been transformed into strength. Her assistant opened the door of the sleek car waiting at the curb, and as she slid inside, she caught sight of Mr. Chickware in the driver's seat. He gave her a respectful nod, as if to say, "Well done." The car pulled away, headlights cutting through the storm. Amara sat back, her head held high, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind her, Tawanda's cries faded into the distance, drowned by the rain. Ahead of her lay not just safety, but a brighter tomorrow, one she had built with her own strength, one that no storm could ever take away again.